This is going to be a quick video on how to change the speaker on a Game Boy Advance using a DS Lite speaker. You're going to need a pair of cutters, possibly some wire strippers, a soldering iron, some solder, probably some solder wick. You'll also need a tri-wing and a Phillips head screwdriver to take the GBA apart. I've got this GBA already disassembled. The LCD ribbon cable is disconnected and the motherboard is unscrewed from the front of the case, so I can go ahead and pull the entire motherboard off, and I flip it over and you can see that's where the speaker actually is. It's plugged in to the board here, soldered on the opposite side, and it uses the extra wiring to go around. The speaker on the GBA has a little bump of plastic right there that's indexed to a cutout on the shell plastic, but the DS Lite speaker is a lot different. It's actually got this big protrusion that comes out. The best way I can tell to put this in is going to be at this angle so that protrusion will still fit in the case, and the wire will actually wrap around kind of the way the original speaker does. But in order to do that, we're going to have to cut away part of the plastic on the shell. Part of that plastic is going to have to come out. I'm going to try to go ahead and do that with just a regular pair of dikes. Don't use your good ones. These are my second pair that are already kind of dull and messed up because this isn't really what their purpose is. But I'm just going to go ahead and try to trim some of this plastic out so that the speaker will go ahead and fit right about there. So I've got this lined up just about where I want it to be. I'm going to go ahead and use a marker to mark the plastic a little bit so I can have an easier time cutting it out in a second. So now that I've got those marked, I'm going to go ahead and pull the speaker out, and then I'm going to use my dikes to go ahead and try to cut some of that plastic out. Okay, so as you can see, I've made several small cuts straight down and then at angles to go ahead and to chop some of that plastic out. I'm going to go ahead and knock some of that out and then do a little test fit to see if that'll work. It seems like I've still got some plastic in the way, so it won't set down all the way. So yeah, I see it now. I'm going to go ahead and trim a little bit more out, especially looks like right about here I've still got a chunk. Okay, so I'm going to try to just kind of scrape out, I'm going to use a flat bladed screwdriver, scrape out some of those chunks of plastic. Okay, and that looks like it fits pretty good. So this is my GBA motherboard with the original speaker that I'm replacing. If you flip it over, you can see the two solder points where you're going to need to desolder there. So let's go ahead and get my iron hot here, and I'm going to heat those up and pull the wires out from the other side. So first I'm going to pull a little bit on the wire that's connected to this hole. Okay, and I've got that one out, and now I'll do the next one. So I've got the wires out, but there's still a little bit of wire strand that got caught in the holes when I was pulling those out. So I have to get those out, and then we also have to make sure there's no hot solder left in the holes there. So I'm going to go ahead and add some solder back to see if I can try to get these wires, little shards of wires, to come out. And that'll be a little bit easier to do if there's some solder in there. It's a little bit hard to see, but you can. There's little bumps of solder there, but there's a little bit of wire that's also caught in the hole. I think I got most of it out. I'm going to add some more solder and then try to wick it and see if if all the solder comes up. Okay, and then all that solder I just wicked up too, so my holes are clear, and that means I will be able to get the new speaker wires in there easily. Well, here you can see the old speaker that I'm replacing next to the DS Lite speaker. You can see that the wires on this one are much shorter than this one. So what I'm going to do is just use some wire strippers and a cutter to shorten these down a little bit and then strip the ends so we can get it through the hole and then solder the new one back in. Okay, so I've got this cut down. I'm going to go ahead and put it back in. Just have to thread in the wire to those two holes and hold it in place and then flip it over so we can solder it in there. Okay, so I actually went ahead and pushed it way further than I needed to just to make sure it won't fall out as I'm trying to flip this thing over. But I can't solder to insulation, so we're going to go ahead and pull that back out just a little bit. Okay, so you might not be able to see it, but just a little bit of that wire is sticking up through the hole there. Okay, and I probably maybe used a little bit too much solder, but I think that's going to be okay, just the way it is. And I'll do the one other side. Okay, I think that looks pretty good. I've got a little bit extra wire sticking up out of this hole, so I'm going to go ahead and just cut those flush here. Okay, now that I've got the wires back in, we can go ahead and put the speaker where it's going to go, just like that. Yep, and I think that'll work just fine. The wires are a little bit longer than the original ones, but they're also a lot thinner, and I knew they'd be flexible enough to get out of the way. So I'm going to go ahead and get some power for this thing and try to put a game in it and see if the speaker sounds any better than the original one did. Okay, so I've got some power hooked up here and I've got Tetris put in. Go ahead and flip it over and turn it on. see how it sounds. Sounds pretty good. Okay, one thing I did want to test out is the resistance of these different speakers. I've got the original Game Boy speaker there. I'm just going to go ahead and hook it up to my multimeter on the ohm setting. So it's 8 ohms, 8.4. Alright, so I'm going to hook up this DS Lite speaker. Okay, so it's a little bit closer to 6 ohms, and so it's about a 2 ohm difference. And I'm not sure how much of a difference that's really going to make, which one's going to be louder or quieter. But I hope you liked this video. If you'd like to see more, be sure to hit subscribe.